Hello and welcome back into the Duke Wisdom Podcast, the first post-ranked win podcast episode. I considered recording it immediately after the game, but ultimately I decided to wait a day and record it on Wednesday night, get it out Thursday. That way it's, good, still keeping on the schedule and keeping a little bit of better timing of previewing the next game, although I'm probably not going to do a very in-depth preview for the Bucknell game on Friday. Well, let's go ahead and get it started. Duke, Michigan State, number 9 Blue Devils, number 18 Spartans. Ugly. Just the most shameful first half of basketball. I don't even know what to say about that first half. It seemed like for a lot of the first half that it was like if Kyle Filipowski didn't touch the ball, if he wasn't the one passing into a shot or taking a shot himself, it was sort of like hiding behind my hands. Didn't want to watch the offensive possessions. A lot of dribbling around, really ugly, just no ball movement kind of. The guards were turning the ball over constantly. It was not pretty. And it really, Kyle Filipowski there for a while felt like Matthew Hurt did for the 2021 team, where it was like, you really only feel comfortable when that guy has the ball. That's how it felt for a while, and that's not something you'd expect for this team, but ultimately that problem got fixed in the second half. But for as bad as Duke was in the first half, 10 first half turnovers, did not play particularly well, didn't really shoot the ball particularly well. Michigan State was a lot worse. Right now, I don't know, man. Right, Michigan State is not a ranked team right now. They're not, and they probably won't be in next week's poll. Just wow. And they came into the night shooting 6.3% or 6.5% or whatever from three in their first two games. They only had two guys. I talked about it on Tuesday's episode. They only had two guys that had even hit a three-pointer in the first two games of the season. They were like 2 of 31 heading into the game. Of course, that changed. They weren't going to do that. They weren't going to lay a goose egg from three against Duke. They end up ending the night 6 of 19. They shoot 31.6% from three. Actually better than Duke, who shot 6 of 22, 27.3%. Duke, it wasn't pretty for Duke. But the second half was a lot better. A lot of players had big second halves, namely Caleb Foster. But before I get into kind of individual player breakdown, I want to talk about kind of the rotation that we're seeing from Shire. So this was the first game that Christian Reeves did not see the floor in. I think that's interesting. And again, Sean Stewart played, but he played like, 3.5 minutes. And against Arizona, he played like 2 minutes. And Jalen Blakes played 2 minutes here against Michigan State. It really seems that as of now, Stewart and Blakes, they're playing, but they might as well not be a part of that rotation. And I never would have guessed that, especially this early in the season, that the rotation is basically 7 guys. It is essentially, that starting lineup of Proctor, Roach, McCain, Filipowski, Mitchell, and then Ryan Young and Caleb Foster. Stewart came in for a couple minutes. Blakes came in for a couple minutes, but that's not really being a deep part of the rotation. And, after the game and kind of the presser, John Shire says, we're going to play the guys you saw tonight. We're not as big as we've been. And, you can't read into too much of what a coach says about a rotation in November, but I don't know. It's got me thinking that those 7 guys might just be who he's planning on running. I got to think Sean Stewart ends up getting more minutes as the season goes on. He maybe takes a few from Ryan Young, and he's too good not to play. But it's really interesting how the rotation is shaping up. A lot of the games that we've seen so far, Roach and Proctor basically never come out of the game. Jeremy Roach probably played the least amount of minutes he'll play in a non-conference game, I feel like, outside of the ones that are blowouts. And he played 34 minutes. Tyrese Proctor played 39 minutes against Michigan State. That's a lot of time, man. That's a lot of time. And so I'm just very interested at how short the rotation already is in November for a team preseason that I thought was going to go 10 deep at least, that had 12 viable rotation players. And, obviously Jaden Schutt is redshirted, and TJ Power seems like he's just not going to play, which seems like a bit of a shame to me that a 5-star recruit's not going to really, seems like he's not going to see the floor a lot. But he'll hopefully have an opportunity. TJ Power will in the next 3 games with Bucknell on Friday and then with LaSalle and Southern Indiana next week. Hopefully Power gets a chance to come in and play some bigger minutes. Same thing kind of with Sean Stewart as well. So let's go over a little bit of what we saw. Duke obviously did a lot better on the boards. They actually won the rebounding battle 35-33. So that's a big thing that you really like to see there from the Blue Devils. And they really won the game by being aggressive and driving the ball, drawing fouls. They end up shooting 30 free throws, going 24 of 30 from the line, which is something that's really great to see, them shooting 80% from the line. And obviously, Michigan State only shoots 12, and for a long time, they only had like 5 attempts. So Duke did a good job of not putting Michigan State on the line. Michigan State, though, settled for a lot of threes, settled for a lot of jump shots. Michigan State's not a polished team. Knowing Izzo's team and knowing how old this team is, how experienced, how talented it is, Michigan State will be a Final Four threat in March. I have no doubt. They're just not that team in November. That Michigan State a lot of times isn't the team in November that people think they're going to be. So I'm not really surprised by that. Sparty will fall out of the top 25 probably, and they'll be right back in about a month, if I had to guess. But let's break down kind of what we saw. I'm just looking at the box score right now, so I'm going to go player by player. Start with Mark Mitchell. He played 22 minutes. He got into a little bit of foul trouble, maybe a little early. I feel like Mark might still be a little bit on minute restrictions, but Ryan Young played well, and I think that's a reason that Mark dipped so low in minutes. But Mark played well in the minutes he did play. He wasn't exactly nailing shots. He's not as aggressive as I would like him to be on offense. I still think that he has such a high level of skill and potential as a driver and a slasher, and he's got the ability to fill up the stat sheet offensively. He doesn't take enough shots. I've felt that way about him since the day he walked in the door. And 2 of 3 from the floor. He was, however, aggressive in getting to the line. He got 9 free throws, and he knocked down all 9 of them, which is huge. 13 points for Mark. He had 9 against Arizona, so 11 points per game so far on the season. I still feel like he's only scratching the surface, but he was so important for Duke to have in this game defensively. He's such a good and important second line of defense in the interior with Kyle that really helps Duke find more of an identity defensively. Without Mark Mitchell, you're seeing even smaller lineups that struggle even more to rebound and even more to defend. And Mark Mitchell is, I think, pretty clearly this team's best defender and most versatile defender at that. So he's very important for this team to have. I liked what I saw from him against Michigan State. Obviously, though, I would still like to see him be a little more aggressive. That moves to Kyle Filipowski, who even when he doesn't have the greatest game in the world, he still does very well. 15 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. And I want to talk about those 3 assists because it felt like more in real time. And he was drawing double teams, and he was being patient. He was being patient on the block with double teams. Sometimes Michigan State would kind of float out, and they'd abandon the double team or even the triple team, I think, in one instance. But Kyle was patient with it. He'd find the open man. We saw it at the end of the game where he hit Caleb Foster for that huge 3 in the second half. But Kyle Filipowski showed so much patience and ability to pass. I think that is the biggest difference between him as a player last season and this season. He doesn't panic. Obviously, he's healthy. He's got the surgery with his hips, 2 hip flip and all that. But he doesn't panic. He's much more poised as a player, much more poised under pressure, and a good, really good passer from what we saw against Michigan State. He has a really good knack for passing out of the post. And I think that's going to be really important as this team kind of creates its identity as a guard-centric three-point shooting team. It hasn't really shown that so far. They haven't shot particularly well. I expect that to change as the season goes on. At least if Duke's going to be really successful, it has to change. Obviously, Kyle so far averaging just under 22 points per game, and I think maybe just under 8 rebounds a game or something close to that. He also had 2 blocks against Michigan State, which was his best shot blocking game so far this season. And he's been great. He's in the National Player of the Year conversation. He'll be in the ACC Player of the Year conversation. Continues to play like this, he'll certainly be an All-American. And I realized a few things about Kyle earlier today. That one, Kyle Filipowski is just the second Duke player all time to lead the team in scoring as a freshman and then return the next season. Johnny Dawkins did that in 1983 and then came back, of course, for 84. Kyle just the second player to ever do that. I do think he is probably like the 5th player from the time that Coach K took over to now. He's probably the 5th player to be Duke's best player in multiple seasons. I think, Johnny Dawkins, of course, takes that crown. He's the best player all 4 years. And then Danny Ferry, Christian Laettner, J.J. Redick. Kyle's probably the first player in like 2 decades that has been able to claim a title like that. He's a special talent and a unusual kind of talent as a sophomore in this era of college basketball. And I urge Duke fans, do not take him for granted. He is a fantastic player. He will be an All-American if healthy. And he's the anchor for this Duke. He's so important. I can't imagine a world in which I'm an opposing coach and my game plan isn't literally just to try to get Kyle Filipowski in foul trouble because of how crucial he is both offensively and defensively, and the fact that he's really the only height Duke has outside of Reeves, but it seems like Reeves isn't a big part of this, rotation. And so I can't imagine a world in which I'm an opposing coach and my game plan isn't just attack Kyle Filipowski and put him on his heels. Try to get him in foul trouble, because that to me is just how you win the game. You try to take Kyle Filipowski out of it. Easier said than done. He's a very, very skilled, talented player. Duke very lucky to have him.
Want to join a community of Duke accounts publishing news, theories, and predictions on Duke athletics? Join the Duke Wisdom Network. Just go to dukewisdom.org/join network today and fill out the form with your name and social media. Or you can DM at Duke_wisdom on Twitter or Instagram. Become a part of the community of Duke fans publishing their takes today. Again, that's dukewisdom.org/join network or DM at Duke_wisdom on Twitter or Instagram.
Tyrese Proctor, next guy I'll kind of run over what he did. He's 4 of 12 from the floor, 1 of 5 from 3. Got to think that shot's going to start falling a little better. It doesn't have to fall like it did in the exhibition, but a little closer to how it did in the exhibition. Still, his best game of the season so far, 13 points, 6 assists, 2 steals, 6 rebounds. Really solid game from Tyrese Proctor. His offense will keep improving right now. I think he's at like 9.7 points per game and like 6.3 assists or something like that. He's got a good chance of being an all-ACC player. He'll continue to improve. He's not exactly where I think a lot of Duke fans thought he was going to be at the beginning of the season, but he'll evolve. He's clearly already better than he was last season. Next guy is Jared McCain, who had a forgettable performance. I talked about those guards just dribbling around a lot, pulling their best James Harden impersonation and not really getting anywhere, but just doing dribble moves and dribbling into nothing. Then nobody really did more of that than Jared McCain, and that's a freshman thing. That's a freshman mistake from McCain. Just 16 minutes, and he laid a goose egg, 0 of 5 from the floor, 0 of 4 from 3. His three-point shot has not been there this season, and that's supposed to be his staple. I mean, he lit it up in the McDonald's All-American three-point contest. I expected one of Duke's best sharpshooters in years, and I think what Duke's seeing right now is a guy that can't find the bottom of the net from three, and I expect that to change. But I think at the moment, maybe it's time to experiment with a different guy in that fifth spot in the starting lineup, and I'll talk about that in a little while. Still have faith in Jared McCain. It is very early. That takes us to Jeremy Roach. Only 2 of 5 from the floor, 1 of 3 from three, not a lot of shot attempts, 7 points. He wasn't great. He had 4 turnovers. The turnovers were a bit of a problem, but he still had 5 assists. Certainly not a horrible day for Jeremy Roach, but not a great one. He moves up a couple spots in the 1,000-point club. He's now up to 1,018. I think he passed Tony Lang and Andre Dawkins to move up a couple spots. But Jeremy, I maintain he's going to be one of the most consistent players for this team. Not the best game for Roach, but Michigan State has a really good backcourt, and so that's expected to throw him off a little bit. So Ryan Young, I think he was like plus 24 in this game. Ryan Young was crazy. Only 2 shot attempts, drilled them both, 4-6 from the line, 8 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. Easily Ryan Young's best game of the 3 so far. He was terrific, and it's that Big Ten mentality. Ryan knows how to play against the Big Ten, dude, and he just dropped an episode of the podcast. Apparently, they're not going to do them when they lose. Understandable, I guess. This one didn't perform as well post Arizona loss either. So I'm thinking that people don't like listening about losing. People do not want to hear about losing, but they like hearing about winning, though. So hopefully that goes well for Ryan. But he had a great game, and I think that there are certain games where Ryan Young is going to be very useful for this team. I think that the Michigan State game was one of those games. Now to the man of the hour, Caleb Foster. 18 points on 7 of 8 shooting from the floor, 4 of 5 from 3. I mean, take Caleb Foster out of this game and Duke goes 2 of 17 from 3. But Caleb Foster, a just absolutely terrific shooting performance. Had one of those characteristic kind of Duke freshman Champions Classic game. Had a very Trevor Keels, like not quite as good as Keels, but a Keels Champions Classic kind of game. He's had an interesting first 3 games, 15 points, then 0, then 18. So very interesting for Caleb Foster, but he's been fantastic. He has shown that of all the freshmen, he's the most ready. He's the best shot maker. And I truly believe he is probably the best option as the 5th starter at the moment. I think that maybe Jon Scheyer should give him a little nudge, give him a little nod into that starting lineup, just see how it goes for a few games. He doesn't have to make it permanent. Jared can make his way back into that role. But I think Caleb Foster has shown that he's probably the guy deserving of that 5th spot, especially since Scheyer seems very married to the 3-guard lineup idea. But Caleb Foster was great. I know Mama Foster's happy. He was cooking, man. He was hitting those shots and doing everything right. He is a huge reason why Duke was able to fend off the Michigan State comeback in the second half and ultimately pull out a win. I mean, without Caleb Foster, I'm not confident that Duke wins that game, but because of him and his heroics there at the end of the game, Blue Devils able to pull the win off, advance to 2-1. They're going into 3 games that ultimately they should win almost without a doubt. The first of which happening this week against Bucknell. Shouldn't see a whole lot of trouble with Bucknell. I'm not actually that familiar with what Bucknell's doing, so I'm going to look that up real quick. We're going to see what's the Bucknell consensus here. So Bucknell drops their first game of the season to Delaware by 19. They then lost again by 19 to UPenn. They beat Niagara. They beat Greg Paulus' squad by 9, and then they lost to LaSalle by 12. I got to think this one's going to be a little lopsided. This is a great opportunity for Duke and for Jon Scheyer to get a little more familiar with some of these guys that he's been flirting with. He's been giving them a couple minutes, but he hasn't let the reins loose on them. Now's the time, John. Now's the time. Sean Stewart, Christian Reeves, TJ Power. Those are the 3 guys. Let them cook. Let them. I get it. First game of the season, he was a little hesitant. Give these guys big minutes, or let them do whatever. Let the starters build a lead in the first half. Hopefully, they can do it pretty quick. Let these guys come in and just see what they're about. See which ones of these guys can contribute, what they can contribute. I think they can all play really big roles for this team, and I think that that at least one or two of these guys can be important rotational players throughout the season. And so I'd love to see double-digit minutes at least for 2 out of 3 of Stewart, Reeves, and Power. I really hope that they get to see the floor a little bit more, and I hope that we see more of a confidence build for Jared McCain, and maybe even a big scoring affair for Tyrese Proctor. I think he could use it. Maybe a stat pad for Kyle Filipowski and his NPOY numbers that he's trying to put up. So big stuff there. I want to briefly talk about the Duke women's basketball team as well. They played their first road game of the season. They traveled to Columbia. That game was also on Tuesday night, and they ended up winning that game 66-62 in a pretty close one. They're back home to play Davidson, though, Thursday night, and then they've got number 6 Stanford on Sunday. That'll be at Stanford. That one's going to be really rough. But, we'll see. That Davidson team's not a slouch, man. They're really not. I covered the UNC Davidson game in Carmichael Arena, and UNC won that game by just 4. That Davidson team has some larger women that can really put some threes up and put the ball on the floor. 6'3", 6'2" players that can move like guards and go get their bucket and knock it down from 3. And they're impressive and they're scrappy. They don't go away. So that's not going to be an easy game for Duke. It really will not be. And that Stanford game especially won't be an easy one. They got a little bit of a test at Columbia, and I think this is going to be a tough 2-game stretch here to end the week for the Duke women's basketball team. And Duke men's team, though, is heading into 3 games that shouldn't give them a whole lot of trouble, at least. But then at the end of the month, the very last game of the month, November 29th, they got to travel to Arkansas, and that's the next one you need circled on the calendar, because never look past anybody. Don't get me wrong. Don't look past Bucknell. Don't look past LaSalle. Don't look past Southern Indiana. I don't want to create bulletin board material for these teams, man. They can win. They can win 100%. Anybody can win any day in college basketball. No doubt about it. But I know that you got to have that Arkansas game circled. First road game, going to be an electric atmosphere. It's going to be a tough game. And I'm interested to see if in 2 weeks from when I'm recording this right now, if in 2 weeks is this team ready for a game like that? Because if the team that played Arizona and the team that played Michigan State shows up to that Arkansas game and plays the same way, that's a loss. 10 times out of 10, they're going to lose that game if they show up and play this way. They're going to have to play a lot better of a game. I think they will play they will be a better team, but will they play a better game under the circumstances of that really tough road atmosphere at Arkansas? That's to be determined, but what we know now is Duke has its first top 25 victory, got a solid win over Michigan State back in John Shire's old tromping grounds in Chicago. Big deal for the second-year coach, big deal for the team and the program. And now heading into Bucknell on Friday. As always, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to follow and subscribe podcast to the YouTube channel. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at Duke_Wisdom. If you want to write for Duke Wisdom and the Duke Wisdom Network, that would be so freaking cool. We'd love to have you on and get everybody contributing and covering this season. And just make sure to go to dukewisdom.org/join network and read all about it and fill out that form, and we'll get you started on something. It's going to be real exciting. It's an exciting season. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.